All right.
Clowning me. It was getting on me like, what the heck are you looking at, bro? The thing is because I couldn't see, like, so the way that they did the interview, all I saw was like a logo. So I wasn't looking at anybody talking.
I got it.
And so
It's
I'm
there
like,
for
yeah, so I'm just looking at a logo at the screen. So I'm just like, as I talk, I'm like, yeah, so anyway. So I'm going to try
All
to
right, great.
focus into this lens.
all right.
Awesome. Looks like we're live. Greetings and God bless. Welcome to another episode of Pastor Mike, Dynamic Voices for a Diverse Church, powered by the Reformed African American Network. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Burns. You can follow me on Twitter at Burns23. We also have, as always, our co-host, the president, founder of the Reformed African American Network. He is a pretty big deal in the evangelical world and community. Mr. Jamar Tisby, what's going on, Jamar?
Hey man, I'm back at I'm getting back to my roots, man. I happen to be recording from my childhood home back up in Waukegan, Illinois, Little Fort. So it feels
Awesome.
good to be home for a second. Got some other meetings going on, but I cleared everything for our guest today.
Yeah, it's a big moment for you, Jamar. You've been asking to have him on the podcast
Yes.
for a minute. You know
Yeah.
how I feel about him. We're talking. Listen, guys, we have an illustrious guest with us. We have been prepping and preparing you guys for this episode. He is a philosopher, a cultural thinker, an academic, an activist, a skilled hip-hop artist. He is an entrepreneur who started fourthdistrict.com. He also just recently started the AND campaign. You know who we're talking about. Show Baraka. Show, how are you, sir?
This is where you insert the applause. Or for some folks, the boos. I don't know. Like, boo. I don't know. I'm doing well. Thank you for that introduction. I feel somewhat important. I feel like.
Well, he forgot to mention your most important roles, aside from being a Christian, husband and father. How's the family?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So yeah, I am. That's obviously a married man right there. Who's so. Yeah.
Hey, I'm married too.
Are you? Okay. You guys.
We was gonna get to it, but Jamar jumped ahead. You know.
Sorry. I'm nervous.
No, goodness, I don't understand this. So anyway, yeah, man, thank you for the introduction. I am married, have 3 wonderful children. Life is a blessing right now. The Lord is teaching me a lot of things through fatherhood and through being a husband and a leader, an entrepreneur, and all those things that you said. So yeah, I'm learning, man.
Now let's get to the nitty gritty. I was talking to one of your friends, Rick Trotter, and he wanted me to ask you this question.
Okay.
And I think all of us are wondering this as well. During Kobe Bryant's last game, did you cry?
Yo, so no, I didn't cry, but it was a moment. I had a moment. I had a moment for it. You know, this is a reality. I've joked with my brother John O, Pastor John O, on with Checkwa over at Cornerstone. He made a statement that has some truth to it, even though he has some condescension in his voice and he's a hater, a Kobe hater. But he made the statement that Kobe Bryant actually retired in 2012, and
wow.
And so to some degree, really, that was the last time Kobe Bryant was great. And so actually, I was like, the last 2 years, I've kind of been like, please, Kobe, just put us out of misery, bro. Like,
right.
Because you're giving fuel to all the Kobe haters right now. It's like the homeboy who keeps getting knocked down and he wants to keep fighting. It's like, bro, like you lost this fight, bro. Stop it.
It's over.
So no, to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't even watch the last game because it was so late, and on the East Coast,
it was very late.
I woke up and watched that mug the next morning though, and I saw the buckets he gave him, bucket after bucket, even though he took 50 of them joints. But hey, I didn't care. He went out the way he should have went out. So Kobe forever, bro.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's right. I knew you were. I remember when you did the Kobe Bryant on him remix. So that was a meaningful moment.
Yeah, man. There you go.
Now, most of us have become familiar with you through the music, but you've always had a much broader influence and a much broader passion than just hip hop. And so what is kind of tying into what you're doing with 4th District and the AND campaign and some of the activism pieces, what are some of the things that you're passionate about that's driving the current projects? Because we can Google search what you're doing, but we can't Google search your heart and your motive.
Yeah.
So what's underlying all of these things that you're doing that seem to be about cultural engagement, community impact?
That's a good question. I think it's a part of it is my makeup of how I was raised, and I think part of what the gifting of the Holy Spirit, and the grace that the Lord has given me as an individual, as a creative, and I like to think of creative more in the sense of being a culture maker, like not just somebody. Because when you say creative, I think people often think of just arts, right? They think of painting, they think of sculpting, they think of creating words and music and taking media and forming it in a way that is appealing to the eye or to the ears. And for me, I see that, but also see much greater. I see policy shaping. I see formulating of friendships. I see the connecting of people to do great missions for the kingdom of God. I see just cultures and structures, and I see creating connections for people to do great work. And so that's part of who I am. Is like how can I contribute to the flourishing of the people of God and those people who can get the residual effects of what the Lord is doing, similar to what we see in Jeremiah 27 through 29. And so for me, that's my heart, man. I just think that when we look at Genesis 1, 2, and 3, I think what we see is God creating people who reflect him, which means we are in ourselves somewhat creators, and we create cultures. John Frame has a wonderful quote. He says that human beings create culture, but God, wait, I jacked that up. You know what? He has a dope quote. So anyway, but it's basically talking about how God he's made creation, but human beings create cultures. And so I just see myself as a culture maker, and as you said, someone who's passionate about these things, and I feel like that's my calling. I think that's what you asked pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, what's the motivation and the mission behind 4th District and the AND campaign? Because I'll tell you from my perspective, both of them have really assisted me in critically questioning some of the presuppositions I hold, particularly some of the 4th District podcasts have been very helpful in that regard. So when you started 4th District kind of as a place for cultural curators, as you guys like to say, what's the motive behind that? How does that connect with the AND campaign? Who are you intending to reach with those ventures?
I think the one thing, so to digress a little bit on all of the things I just said about myself, I think there's also there's the warning and the concern that I would say to people like myself who like to engage in things, is that we can also have a problem with doing too much sometimes. And I know that's somewhat of the knock on me. Some people are like, "What, man, Show's always doing something. He's always starting, And I think that's a good thing, and also, to some degree, it can be bad, depending, especially when you talk about marketing and branding and all that stuff, because people never really know what you're doing, right? But to say all that, I think one of the things that I'm passionate about is when I see problems, right? When I see the city, or when I see media, when I see issues, I got a term from a friend. They said they call themselves a solutionary. And that's kind of, I was like, I'm feeling that for the rest of my life. I'm calling myself a solutionary. And so for me, when I see problems, I don't want to just complain about them, and I don't want to just say, hey, let's sit around and just complain about how, racism or how sexism agent, whatever. Let's try to find solutions in the best way that we the Lord has shaped us. So for 4th District, and it goes back even further to, my involvement with Reach Records, to my involvement with church plants in the particular cities that I've lived in and the churches that I've been a part of, to me starting High Society, to me doing the Lions and Liars podcast, to me just doing different things, and then to what you've just mentioned, 4th District was the culmination, and the conception of 4th District was some guys approached me about starting a Christian hip hop site, and I was like, bros, y'all got to think much bigger than Christian hip hop. And I was like, I'm not
Right.
helping you. I'm not helping you if you want to start a Christian hip hop site. You know, there are already sites that do it and do it pretty well, even if you don't like them. They're doing a good job of covering, what happens in Christian hip hop. I think what we need is something that deals with the greater scope of culture in general, from not just a Christian perspective, which let's try to address it from an urban, and I know that the word is somewhat fluid and elusive, but as best as we can
Mhm.
define it, let's address this culture from an urban Christian perspective. And so, as you said, we consider ourselves to be curators and thinkers of culture and art. And so the goal was to take every facet of culture that we can think of in which we feel like we're subject matter experts, from music to fashion to film to visual arts, whatever, sports, and let's have people who love these things, but operate somewhat from a different worldview, right? Let's have them communicate, write, and talk, and articulate their perspective to people who often have to like sift through the wheat to find their cultural relevance within the conversation, right? Like there are a lot of people having conversations about culture, but there are not a lot of people who are having conversations about culture in a context that we feel like we don't have to chew and spit the bones out too
Right.
often, right?
That's
And so
good.
that's what I wanted to try to do, is create a platform for people like me. Now, I don't want to make black people a monolith or urban people a monolith. I understand that we are many types of different shades, philosophies, and all that. But I feel like there's enough people who think within the paradigm in which and in which I process, and other folks who wanted to come alongside me, that I think we can reach a decent mass amount of people and keep this thing sufficient and productive to move and grow.
Now, I think this is for many Christians a very novel approach. I think you can definitely make the argument that it's a historical and a biblical approach, your method of engaging the culture, if you will. I'm curious about sort of what's behind that, and perhaps the process and the journey that brought you here, and maybe starting with problems you saw in broader evangelicalism, however you want to define that word, and the way
Absolutely.
Christians that you saw were engaging the culture that made you say, maybe there's another way to do this.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's
I'll try to
good.
keep it brief. There's, because I can talk forever, but I grew up just, and I don't like to make it seem like my mom was like this, like Angela Davis, but she used to participate in a lot of Panther activities. And so just imagine growing up in a household where your mother and your father, was excited about their blackness, right? Um, and so I kind of grew up in this household. Though we did go to church, like Christianity was not the metric that pushed and determined how we lived. It was a bunch of different other things. Every individual child had their idol growing up, right? And so I grew up with this kind of like this conflict in identity and who I was from age, I guess early age till about 19 when I became a Christian. And when I became a Christian, I still didn't understand, like, how do I reconcile like all this stuff that I feel about my skin, my hair, uh, the communities that I live in, the things that I've seen, the racism I've experienced, the hatred that I've portrayed to other people, the prejudices that I have. Like, how do I reconcile all of this? And usually the answer was just kind of like homogeny. It was just like, well, you go to this predominantly white church, depending on if that was the circle and you just kind of let just the mainstream evangelicalism just wash over you, and then you become assimilated into a culture. And I did that for many years. I went to a great Bible teaching Presbyterian church, and then a Bible church after that, and great intentions from the pulpit, great intentions from the hearts of individuals, but the orthopraxy, I think, was somewhat flawed, not because they intentionally wanted to mislead people. I just think they saw the theology that they practiced through a particular lens and didn't feel like there was any interpretation outside of that. Right? There were no emphasis on other things other than things that they thought were important in the scripture. And so for me, it was just this tension of, wow, man, like how do I begin to reconcile this? And honestly, man, it just took a lot of reading. It took some reading of non-Christian stuff. It took some reading of some Christian stuff that some people may call heresy. It took some reading of historical stuff, and it took some reading of my white brothers who have kind of like held the banner of evangelicalism for the last couple of centuries. So, and in approaching that, I realized that there was a beautiful thing that the gospel communicates, and it's like one, and I'm glad that this teaching is starting to catch a lot of trend and fire in today's narrative, is that we have to start with the image of God. Like when we talk about about the gospel, so often we always started with sin. We always started with people are fallen, people are broken. You know you're a sinner, right? Have you lied? Have you stolen? Have you cheated? You know what I'm saying? And in my communities, and and people that grew up in some broken areas, you didn't have to remind us that we were thieves and we were broken. Like, well, all we have to do is just look in our household and recognize, oh man, yep, there's people smoking crack, or there's violence, there's this. The problem is that the suburban communities know how to hide their sin a lot better. They have this spiritual makeup, but in our communities, they're broken. So in the suburbs, you need to convince people that they're sinful, right? Because their lifestyle kind of communicates and perpetuates this idea that they don't need help. But in the hood, I realized that we were using a method that wasn't helpful, wasn't beneficial. So let's start with the image of God, and then work from, you were created for something more glorious than what we see here. But something went wrong, right? Something went wrong. There's the fall. Things have been corrupted. We manipulate. We pervert. But redemption in Jesus, and he makes all things new. But it doesn't stop there. Like, our responsibility as Christians is to try to redeem and restore the beauty of the image of God into all things. And so that's not just the relationship with us and God. That's a relationship with us and one another. And thirdly, it's the relationship with us in the land, and us in the context of being cultivators and creators, right? And so, and all of that's what's pushed me towards engaging culture. It's like, it's not an option for me anymore. It's it's easy to create utopian societies. It's easy to create these ghetto silos where we can celebrate our own oneness, I guess you can say. But I think there's a beauty in the scriptures that you see in Acts and you see in other contexts. It's not just that we create our silos and our fellowships. What we definitely have to do is it's very important that we have community context where people are mutually growing with one another and edifying one another. But the call is to make disciples, and different philosophies. People have different philosophies on how you make disciples. And so I consider this a process of disciple making, and me engaging the culture, making music, writing, creating, helping to create policies, engaging in politics. These are things that I feel are evangelical, and as well as disciple making. So that is the long answer and why I feel it's important, because I struggled with identity, and because I found that answer in the Gospels, I feel like other people can find a similar freedom that I had in reconciling why I'm created in a particular way to how Jesus has died for our sins and redeemed us to a wonderful God.
Yeah, now this is so important. You talk about and you embody this, this tightrope of appreciating your heritage and who you are, but not elevating it into Afrocentrism. But you've been doing this in music form for years, and almost, when we go back to Talented Tenth, it's almost a semi-prophetic view of the systemic corruption and some of the issues that we would face in terms of affirming dignity and the Imago Dei, way before hashtags became popular, way before many of these incidents became huge. So from your perspective, though, how are you navigating this without buying into the lie and the deception of Afrocentrism or ethnocentrism to where we are superior?
Yeah, so I will say, but what I would say is ethnocentrism. I don't have a problem with ethnocentricity. Like, I don't have a problem with somebody loving who they are. Now, I know there's a problem with the defining of that, like in a sense, is like it's the center of all things. Like, yeah, that's problematic. It's not the center of all things for me because Jesus is the center. But within the center of Jesus, I recognize He has created me, as you know, Amisho Baraka, right? So I don't have a problem with people owning who they are and being very proud of who they are. I don't have a problem with the white Southerner doing that. I don't have a problem with the Korean brother doing that. Who, you know, I don't have a brother with the brother from Harlem doing that. Now, as you said, the problem is supremacy, and what I've seen is how a lot of folks are trying to deal with white supremacy is by preaching a black supremacy, and that's scary to me. That's very dangerous. And I was that at one point in time. Like, don't get it twisted. I was my first couple years of college and like high school, last years of high school. I hated white folks. I was on my, like, I used to read everything that I could. I remember going around preaching Jacob's theory about how white people were created by the black germ in the Caucasoid Mountains, and so.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I believed, and then the gospel reformed that. So what I think I'm trying to do is balance this, like you said, like, or walk this tightrope of how do we as individuals, like very similar to what Paul did. Paul was the proudest Jew of them all, and he was like, "Look, I'm a Jew, dog. Like, this is what I do. Circumcised, Pharisee of Pharisee." It's like, look, I'm black. I love my nappy hair. I love the fact that my melanin keeps me protected from the sun. I love the way we turn everything into a celebration. We can't even laugh without like turning it into a spectacle. Like, I love that about black people. Right?
That's right. That's right.
I love us, right? But it's not the ultimate thing. I recognize the ultimate thing is Jesus, and I am willing to. It's also his supremacy is so pertinent in my life that I'm willing to even deny myself in times so that I can bring other people into my experience to show them how wonderful of a life I have, and also for them to reciprocate that to me, right? To love them and say, but this is the problem, without losing who I am. And and dare I say, Christianity in itself has been a one-way exchange. It hasn't been, let us learn about the indigenous, or let us learn about the minority within the country, but it's let us give you, let us, and it was even dangerous because there's a lot of African Americans. When we talk about the whole Pan-Africanism was started by Christians, black Christians, right?
Right.
And so they got warped into this perspective of let's go civilize the savages in Africa. With Cromwell and Du Bois believed this for a long time, and then eventually he denounced it. But like, so this is the tension that we've kind of grown into. And so what I'm trying to do is just let's live in this lovely exchange of totally believing and accepting and loving myself for who I am. And that means reading more of the people that I think deserve to be read, celebrating those people, talking about those people, trying to figure out what is black culture, because that's very elusive in itself, but not denying our white brothers, or our Anglo brothers, our Korean or Latino or Hispanic brothers and sisters the right to do the same for themselves. And as well, let's exchange our beautiful cultures with one another in the gospel. Beautiful book by, I didn't finish it all, so I don't know if he said something really crazy at the end, but Richard Twist, One Tribe, Many Nations, One Church, Many Tribes, was a book that talks about this in pretty good detail.
So that,
Jamar, get in there.
Yeah, man, it sounds awesome, and everything you're saying sounds good and attractive. I'm just wondering, what kind of flack have you caught? What kind of pushback have you had for this approach to culture and disciple making, and how have you responded?
All of it, all of them. Think of everything.
Show has had no pushback. No pushback whatsoever.
I don't even know what that term means. So I'm like, what? It's been easy selling. Brother, I don't know where to start, to tell you the truth. I think I've lost it. I had a lot of, when I remember making Talent at 10th, I had a lot of people tell me that this was like almost career suicide. I had people tell me that the album was for black people. Well, as if that's some sort of pejorative in a sense, right? But also, I've had people say that they weren't going to come. Like, so if I performed at a seminary one time, and people contacted the president of the seminary and said they weren't going to come to the show because I made a song Talent 10th. I made the song Jim Crow. I've had it all, brother. I've had people, but the beautiful thing, but this is the beauty. So I've had it. I'll say I had it all. And remember, I wrote this album. Most of the album was written in 2012. Right.
Wow.
So a lot of this is before. Is definitely before Mike Brown's, before Trayvon Martin.
Before Trayvon. Yeah.
It was. I think Oscar Grant was like becoming more popular because of the YouTube video and the know that they was making a movie about his life. So a lot of this stuff wasn't like as Tyler said, it wasn't really on the radar, and so people were just like, and I mean even artists were like, bro, don't do it, like you're crazy, and I was just like, man, at this point I'm done, like I don't care. And I will say the one thing I wish I would change is my posture. Felt like I wasn't. I made a lot of the album in anger. I made a lot of the album in angst, and I would say that you learn, and I wish I would have done that differently. But I don't regret anything that I wrote and communicated. I do regret how I defended the album in some of the early months when it was released. But I will say, apart from all that, what's beautiful is like the responses that I've had like 2 years or a year or 3 years after the album release. Random people just emailing me or hitting me on Twitter or Facebook. Just, man, if I can show you some of the on my fan page, some of the inbox messages I get on Facebook, it's like, bro, I apologize. I judged you harshly over Talent 10th, but man, like, it's so prophetic, or it's this, it's that. Like, oh, I wish I would have. I hate that I slammed you. I hate that I said this, and it's just like that brings just, man, tremendous joy in my heart. And the one thing that I've learned in this whole process is that, like, and I hate to call myself a prophet because I don't necessarily want, but the one thing I have to learn is that, you know, there's no reward for being. To want to be rewarded, in a sense, is cheap from God. Like, God is using you to communicate something that is so far outside of yourself. You shouldn't get praise for it, right? Because it's not your message, it's not your voice. And so I've learned to not be bitter. I've learned to not like expect praise. I've learned, like, in the creation of art, like, people are going to criticize and critique it, and rightly so, because if this is an exchange of market, then yo, I don't like it. Or if they listen to something and they're like, yo, I'm putting this out here for public discourse, and if they feel like this is damaging the public square, then they have a right to communicate that. I have a right to defend it. And I think now more people are wise, are in a place, more mature in a place to now defend the album. Because I think even some of my brothers rock with, some of them were like, yo, I don't know how to defend this because I just don't know what to do with some of these songs and some of these things you're saying. And so, and I've matured a lot, to say the least.
Man, so let's do this, because you talked about how you're a dreamer. You talked about how you kind of see things, see problems, solutionary, and you just want to get in and create solutions. So let's talk about it. Over the next 2, 3, 4 years, let's mobilize and motivate some people to start some things or to see some problems. What do you see as major issues that are not on our radar right now, or should be more on our radar, that need to be addressed, talked about, and maybe some organizations need to be started to assist the African American community and reconciliation between God's people?
There's 2 things that I think are very important. I'll spend a brief, and I'm not saying this is not exhaustive. These are the things that I have been burdened with. 2 things, and the first thing is something I'm passionate about, but I was just praying that the Lord just gives me the desire to just spend way more time on it, because right now I'm not giving enough time on it, and that's an apologetic for African Americans. There's too many of us who are concerned with an apologetic for white suburban evangelicals. So I like to share this example of when Rob Bell wrote the book Love Wins. the blogosphere, from Together to the Gospel, to whoever, Kevin DeYoung, Francis Chan, to whoever wrote responses, right? And amazing, articulate responses. And African Americans like ourselves, we're engaged in those conversations. But if we, depending on where you live, obviously, and the community that I live in and that I lived in at the time, if I go outside, I can poll 1,000 people in my community. Ain't near one of them care about Rob Bell. Ain't none of them heard of Rob Bell. And ain't none of them dealing with the idea that love wins right now. But what they are dealing with is Hebrew Israelites. They're dealing with this idea of Egyptology, Kemetic science. They're dealing with the Nation of Islam. They're dealing with a lot of things that we aren't giving attention to. They're dealing with the idea that, Christianity stole all of its beliefs and tenets from Mesopotamia, Marduk, and Egypt. Osiris is Jesus stole Osiris and all this other stuff. And these jokers are slick talkers, bro. They are slick talkers, and they are charismatic, and they get you, and they feed to the pain of white supremacy.
Yeah.
And that's what gets these brothers. That's what gets our brothers and sisters in our community. And then on top of the fact that churches aren't really engaged in the community, that's something that I feel like if we don't do something as African Americans in the next 3 or 4 years, what we're going to see is we already know we're at a post-Christian society. We already know that a lot of people don't feel the need to go to church, and it's crazy how that's growing in the African American context, right? Like, we always have considered ourselves as a spiritual people, as far as I've in my short life living. But I think it's now what we're seeing is like there's this relativism that's sweeping, and a lot of that is what I think is important to the next issue and cause, is because of the liberal agenda and the narratives that are being created within media and politics, and the policies that are being started. And so the answer to that has been the AND campaign. Myself and my brother Justin Giboney, who is a lawyer here in Atlanta, got together through our brother. We met through Pastor John O. Cornerstone, and he was just a dude who was just like, man, like, I need to find some other Christian lawyers or politicians who want to stand up for the gospel and not just placate to the Democratic Party, right? Because that's what black people are supposed to do. Like, we just vote Democratic, right? I don't care what they say. Like, well, we're gonna justify it somehow because we ain't voting for the Republicans. So in a sense, it's like, what do we do? And rightfully so in a lot of ways, because the Republicans have done a heinous job at managing their relationships with minorities and some of the policies they've created. So both parties have done a disservice to minorities, I guess you could say, or urban context. And so urban Christian context, to be very specific. And so what the AND campaign is what we're trying to do is change the narrative, man. Like, create a new narrative, push back evil from a biblical perspective, and how we address policies, how we express and address social issues, social justice. I don't believe that we should allow everything that is dealing with justice to be ran and controlled by academics and liberals and people who are so distant from the church. It's so, like, we know that almost every great revolution that's happened, not only just in America, but almost in time, has been started by somebody of faith. Right. Because they had a proper understanding of what justice was, and they had a proper understanding of of how God said to care for the marginalized and the oppressed and the people who were disenfranchised. And so for us, I think we've gotten so comfortable in this feast of being mega churches that we don't know what to do in the famine. And I think the AND campaign is an organization, and I would love to see engage the public square with compassion and conviction, because we see that the liberals have great compassion and they care they appear that they care. They say all the right things to show as if they care for minorities especially. But those who we may align ourselves with spiritually on the right share some of our convictions, but they lack compassion. And so what the AND campaign is an organization that believes that we transcend party. We're de-emphasizing party. We have people who are part of our campaign who are both Democrat, Republican, and Libertarian. So it's not whether or not you have to vote Republican or Democratic, but it's about how do our Christian values inform our political ideologies.
Wow. So Tyler, can we go ahead and ask him about the current presidential campaign?
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm eager to hear his thoughts. Well, he announced today. See, he announced today that he's running as third-party candidate, right?
I'm going for it, baby. I'm going for it. Write me in, cuz. Write me in. Bow ties. Everybody.
Well, yeah, so you're talking about how our faith informs our political stances, and here we are faced with a presumptive nominee in Donald Trump for the Republican Party and Hillary Rodham Clinton, who a lot of people have lots of issues on, particularly Christians. So, I mean, how are you parsing this current political climate, especially in terms of the presidential race?
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's hard for, even if it was Obama, Romney, Bush, Gore, like, I don't think you can ever, I don't think the Christian is ever, and if there is an individual who's at the line, that you walk into a general election and say, I know all of my convictions line up with this individual. Like, and my brother Justin Giboney has a statement. He says that if you don't vote your values, somebody else will vote them for you. And so, and a lot of times what we do is we create the salient issues. We say, okay, how do we feel about abortion? How do we feel about, family values? And sometimes we'll have some economic issues in there. Like, how do we feel about government spending? Maybe, right? I don't know. Dependent. And then we'll say, well, if the candidate lines up with me on those three, then that's who I'm rocking with. Well, at the same time, these individuals, they don't care about real important social reforms. They don't care about how they're unjustly imprisoning folks in particular communities. Once they give these individuals life past the womb, they just kind of, they're done with them. So it's not life from the cradle to the grave. It's just life from the cradle and we're done with you. So as a Christian, I feel like you don't walk into any election saying, oh, that's the sure shot vote right there. There's always going to be compromise if you're going to engage in, and I think that's just the thing we have to wrestle with as Christians, being in this already but not yet kind of like mind frame. It's just like we got to recognize that there's going to be some things that we're going to have to be like, man, Lord, figure out how to reconcile this to you. So all that to say, I'm not voting for any one of those jokers. What I'll do is I'll potentially vote for a third-party candidate or write somebody in, right? But what I will do, hold 1 second, hold up. My son just broke it in.
No, we love it. We love it.
Rodney Curry.
It's okay. Go outside. Here. Hold on 1 second.
Nah, you good. You good.
Love it.
Now, I think he's really bringing up some great points, Jamar. I think, in particular, the kind of this idea that, from a political standpoint, there's no perfect, and I think we talked about that, right? There's no perfect option. There's not one candidate that fits us, but at the same time, there are decisions to be made, right?
Yeah, there are compromises. I'm wondering about this whole third party thing because, as he mentioned, I mean, you can go back the last 4 or 5 elections just not to be overwhelmed and know there aren't any ideal candidates. So is it in every election that we're voting third party, or I'm guessing there are just probably fewer compromises that we have to make when the choices aren't the ones that we have right now?
Right.
Yeah. So, Sho, we were just talking about, well, I was just bringing up, like, voting third party, as you say, you can go back as far as you want, and there's never been an ideal candidate for the Christian where you didn't have to compromise on some very important things. And so is that third party option or write-in option always the choice, or in this particular election is that salient?
Yeah, I understand. I think there can be exceptions. I mean, this is the thing. Like I will never ever, excuse me, I will never. Well, I would judge a Christian off who they vote for. I was gonna say I know, but
Keep it real.
there are some folks, like for instance, let's just say I'll make it a very easy um, example. Like, all right, so you talk about Abraham Lincoln running for presidency, and he's guaranteeing that he's going to abolish slavery, right? And his, I think it was Jefferson he was running against. I can't remember. So you have his opponent who's like, nah, I think we're good. I think slavery's a good thing. So um, even if Abe Lincoln had a couple of other issues that he was like, yo, I'm not gonna rock with you on this because, and we felt like I can understand how a person can say, you know what, even though two of these pretty major issues I don't agree with, I think this abolishment of slavery is so huge for me that I can't not vote against this conviction. And so for me, what I would do is I'd be like, look, I get that, I understand, and I don't judge that individual for that. And I think there are some people today who feel that way about like abortion. They're like, I am so adamant
Right.
about abortion that I cannot vote against, or I cannot vote for a candidate who is a proponent of abortion in any shape, form, or fashion. And my thing is like, okay, I look, I get that. But I think what the AND campaign is doing is what we're communicating is trying to inform people about policies and ideas, and not aligning ourselves necessarily with any one candidate, but creating a greater scope of saying like, here's what we think are important value issues, platforms that we deal with, and if anything, let's also emphasize the importance of who's going to represent you in your districts as congressmen and women,
Huge.
who's going to be your senators, who's going to be your governors, who's going to be your judges, who's going to be your mayors. Um, and so these are things that I think that are quite important, even if you don't vote for a Trump or a Hillary or a third candidate or Bernie Sanders. I don't know, maybe that brother got a chance. But make sure you vote for somebody on the federal and state levels, because those individuals determine a lot about your life. So, for instance, me and dealing with, I have kids on the autism spectrum, and I think it's important for me within the state of Georgia to put people in office who care about providing subsidies or opportunities for families with special needs, because it is hard raising children with special needs. If you are a candidate who doesn't care about that, and this is the thing about local level politics, parties they're not really emphasized as much. It's not as important because you don't have to worry about the abortion stuff. You don't have to worry about gay marriage, because that stuff is usually well, yeah, it's to some degree you do, but usually it's smaller stuff like, are we going to defund this particular community or this school district? Are we going to have these charter schools take over these schools? Are we going to create these particular laws and penalize people for doing this? And if you are a person who like, these things matter to me, I need to know what each judge or each candidate believes, then that's the person I'm putting in office. And I think to some degree we use that on a larger scale. So all that to say that I said nothing, I don't know, but hopefully it made sense.
No, that's really helpful, just from a standpoint of voting for people. I was just having a conversation with a lady locally who's kind of plugged in, just asking about, how important it is for the sheriff's race down here where
Absolutely.
I live, which is massive, sets policy for how we're perceived and how people in urban communities are perceived.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's something that matters.
If you had if Ferguson and the county that Ferguson was in Missouri had a different demographic within, like the city was 60% African American, if I'm not mistaken, at the time.
Yeah.
But it was like less than 3 people within the city council in the county who worked there that was African American. That is a disparaging. That's a problem. That's problematic, right? And so, I believe if you had a more diverse, or a city that a city government that represented more of the people, then you may not even have a Mike Brown issue like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, but this is the thing. Like, we don't. I hate to say this as this sweeping statement. But oftentimes, African Americans have a problem with caring about local government.
Huge, yes, absolutely.
And so what we have to do is begin to inform people on the importance of it. I think Baltimore, and I use this example in another interview. I think Baltimore is a perfect case of how just voting for people off of historical connection fails you. Like, Baltimore has been a city in peril for decades, and it's always had a Democratic mayor. And
right.
those Democratic mayors have never really concerned themselves about the marginalized people in that city, right? But for some reason, you ain't gonna get black people to think outside of voting for a Democratic mayor. So at some point, we have to say, all right, well, if the Democratic Party just knows they're gonna get our vote, we got to change something, right? It's like, I'm not gonna help if I know I'm gonna get your service no matter what I do. Why do I need to serve you? Like, why do I need to do anything for you? And so we have to begin to change that narrative. And I think that's part of what my brother Justin is doing in true application as he ran as a delegate here in the 5th District of Atlanta. And he won that delegate seat to go to Philadelphia and determine who the Democratic president will be. Is that he communicated to the whole 5th District, to the senator and to other people running. It's like, look, you guys will no longer just ignore the faith-based voice. We have a large contingency of people who will not be bullied into believing or doing and saying what you guys want us to say just because you can throw some money at an organization and get them to throw a rainbow flag up there to say, oh yeah, all things as well, because you were tanking, right? He said, no, there's some people who have conviction, though we're compassionate and we'll sit and reason. We're not going to just roll over and say, you know what, our faith doesn't matter, our values don't matter. So,
man, that's
so good.
I love it.
And I know you guys both
just
have
to be
to
clear,
get going. I wish we could just continue.
1 second.
Go ahead.
To be clear, my boy Justin didn't say anything about a rainbow flag. That was me. That was I was.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want him to feel like
Put your boy out there. This is going viral, man. Come on, it's going viral.
So anyway.
Well, and I know you have to get ready to go, and we just thank you so much just for spending some time with us, and we're definitely going to have you back. But the last question I want to ask you is, it sounds like you need to not just be doing albums, but also writing books and presenting volumes of material. And when is the book coming out? You know, I do want to hear about when the album is coming out, because I've heard tell about the album, but when is the book coming out? I mean, I just want to read your thoughts and hear more of that.
That's humbling. That's flattering. I'm so insecure when it comes to, like, it's funny how the one person who's giving me hope is weird is Ta-Nehisi Coates, because he didn't have a master's degree. He didn't graduate. He didn't have a doctorate. And when you listen to that brother speak, he's well informed. He's educated. He's intelligent.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so for me, I've always had this insecurity of feeling like I had to chase a doctorate, and I had to have all of these number of degrees behind me in order for somebody to hear what I had to say about a particular issue. And so, man, I'm wrestling with those insecurities. The other thing is that the people that I love to read are just so intelligent. Like, my God. And I'm like, I'll never achieve that level of articulation. And so I just kind of just stop. I'm just like, I don't know. So, I don't know, man. It's funny how I've been approached to do some stuff on that level, and people have asked me similar questions, and I think that's something that I really have to get the Lord to deal with me in. It's like, even if I don't impress the highest of academia, there are some people who would appreciate what I have to say, and so I'm working through it. I'm working through it. So.
I'll tell you what, you can really just dip your toe in the water by writing blog posts. I know this website.
Here we go. I knew it was coming.
I know this website where you can just kind of test some of those ideas, get feedback, encourage some folks, and maybe this thing rolls into something else.
The only problem is I'm not reformed enough for you guys. I'm not.
See.
I don't know. I believe in I think I don't believe enough in what you guys believe to to qualify.
You believe Jesus is the Savior? We'll take it from there.
I do. I believe in Millie rocking too. So
I'll tell you what. You got an open invitation. Open invitation to contribute, to be on the show, and Rand and pass the mic. We definitely want to keep up with what you're doing at 4th District and the AND campaign. I see a lot of intersection and a lot of overlap. Certainly, where my mind is definitely tracking with you on everything you just said. So, man, we're just thrilled, praying that the Lord blesses your work. Consider us partners in the ministry, allies, however we can be.
Yes.
Man, thank y'all for what y'all do. I mean, y'all, man, like, there's a lot of people who I'm friends with in real life and on Facebook who share your content and who's blessed by what you guys are doing. So, man, God bless it. And plus, the Ellises speak highly of y'all, so I rock with anybody the Ellises rock with.
We love the Ellises. We love the Ellises.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well,
awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, show. I want you guys to like the podcast, share it, rate, review it on iTunes and the Satchel app. Keep tuned into us at Rand Network on Twitter, @_Pastor Mike on Twitter as well. And you can follow us. Show, where can they follow you?
You can follow me to the grocery store. I gotta go buy some groceries right now. You can borrow a couple of dollars, you know what I'm saying? But on Twitter, you can holler at me at Misho Baraka. It's AMISHOBARAKA. Same on Facebook, I think. I'm not sure, but Show Baraka fan page on Facebook, and campaign is AND campaign. That's man. That's right now. I mean, I got some good news coming in June, early June, and y'all just stay posted, bro.
We will. Thank you so much for your time, show. We appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll see you guys soon on the next Pass the Mic.
God
bless you.